Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. We are starting the book Head Girl of the Chalet School by Elinor M. Brent-Dryer. Chapter 1. The Coming Term. Two girls were walking down Palmerston Road, Portsmouth, with a graceful swing which drew the eyes of the passers-by to them. The elder of the two, slender and pretty, with an unusual amount of brown curly hair, tied loosely back from a vivid face, was holding forth to the other, a smaller girl with black eyes shining out of pale, pointed face, which looked the paler for the straight black haircut round it in page-boy fashion. "It's going to be difficult, you see, Joey," said the older girl as they passed before a cafe, where they evidently expected to meet someone. "If only Madam hadn't gone and gotten married this year," she added. Joey pulled her brown hat more firmly on to her head before she replied. "I think you are a bit selfish about that, Grizel," she said mildly. "After all, she did wait a whole year before she did it, and it's worse for Robin and me than for you." "I do wish Bet had stayed on till the end of the year," said Grizel. "After all, she's only just 18, and heaps of girls go to school long after that. Why, the head of the High was nearly 19. "Yes, and now she's at Oxford," said Joey. "Bet is only going to be at home. I'm sorry if you feel like that about it, but it can't be helped. And there's Mamie and the Robin at last." The two girls turned to look down the road, where a tall, graceful girl of 22 or 3 was coming along, holding the hand of a small girl of 8, whose lovely little face was lifted to her companion. As they saw the two girls awaiting them, the pair hurried their steps, and presently they were all seated round a table chattering away, while Miss Maynard, who was maths mistress at the Chalet school to which they belonged, gave her orders to the waitress. "Didn't know you were coming, Robin," said Joey, as she helped the small girl to unfasten her coat and hang up her hat. "Thought you were going to stay with Mrs. Maynard this morning." "It was such a fine day," said the mistress, "and I thought she might as well come. She loves Portsmouth. Don't you, my little one? And we go back tomorrow." "Isn't it joyous?" said Joey eagerly. "I love England, of course, but the Troll is home now, and I'm dying to see my sister again. How she could be so stupid as to get mumps at Christmas is more than I can think. It's messed up her holidays anyway." "Poor Tante Marguerite," said Robin pensively. "Will she be quite well now, Joey? Shall we go to see her when we get home?" "Sure of it," said Joey. "Shouldn't wonder if she wasn't at Innsbruck waiting to welcome us." "I wish Madam was back at the chalet," sighed Grizel, her mind reverting to her own particular problems once more. "It won't be easy this term. Easter term never is." "But you've been games prefect long enough to be able to carry responsibilities," said Miss Maynard bracingly. "Why are you so upset about being head girl?" "Games give you a certain hold," explained Grizel. "Gertrude will do well as games prefect. She'd have done just as well as head girl. I wish I hadn't been chosen, of course. I shall do my best, Miss Maynard, but it won't be easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," replied the mistress. Then she changed the conversation. It was true that Robin never repeated things. Still, it was better that she should not hear Grizel's woes voiced quite as plainly as this. Therefore, Miss Maynard turned to Joey and asked her some questions about the books she had come to buy. "Got 3 of them," replied the girl. "Francis Thompson was 5 bob, but worth it. The Green's History was 5 too. The other thing was 6pence. "I can't understand how you can read those awful goody-good books," interposed Grizel. "It isn't you a bit, really." "I think they're so priceless," said Joey, with a grin. "Anyway, they do teach you a lot of history." "But they're so biased," objected Grizel. The one you lent me seemed to be fairly reeking with hate for the English and George III and his ministers. It's so silly, too, when it all happened more than 100 years ago." "Well, they had a lot to put up with," said Joey broad-mindedly. "After all, Greenville and his idiotic Stamp Act was enough to drive anyone mad, especially when they hadn't a chance of saying anything one way or another. And Miss Annersley says that it was a very good thing for us that the American colonies did break away, so it was all for the best." Grizel shrugged her shoulders. She was not historically inclined, and to her way of thinking, it didn't really matter whether the Americans had remained part of the empire or whether they broke away from it. She simply could not understand Joey Bettany's interest in people long since dead and gone. They finished their lunch with an amiable discussion of books for the school library, in which even the Robin joined, for she read a good deal for her 8 years, and had her own views on the subject of stories. "We've got plenty to take with us," said Miss Maynard at last. "That case will be full now, and I won't have any more to look after than I can help. You 3 must go in your suitcase, Joe. As it is, we shall have a good deal of luggage." "It's the only bother about bringing books from England," said Grizel. "I've got one to put in my case, too." "We've got plenty to take with us," said Miss Maynard at last. "That case will be full now, and I won't have any more to look after than I can help. Your 3 must go in your suitcase, Joe. As it is, we shall have a good deal of luggage." "That's the only bother about bringing books from England," said Grizel. "I've got one to put in my suitcase, too." "Well, we can't help it," said Joe philosophically. "After all, we can't expect to get books there in English. At least, not all the books we want." "Yes, thank you, Miss Maynard. I've quite finished. Shall we get ready to go now?" "Yes, I think so. Fasten up your coat collar and collect your possessions, girls. Joe, see to Robin. I want to go to the china shop to get 1 or 2 things, so we must hurry, as we ought to catch the early train if we possibly can. I don't like motoring through the forest after dark in this weather." Miss Maynard made all the haste she could, and an hour later saw them in the train of Southampton, and the girls glancing at their books while the mistress made up her accounts, and the Robin peered out at the fast-falling dusk. "I do not like the English winter," she announced suddenly. "Don't you, darling?" said Miss Maynard absently, as she tried to balance her account. "Never mind. We'll soon be back at the Ternsey. You like winter there, girls. We are nearly at Southampton. Close your books and pack up, or we may miss the train. We shall have to rush as it is." They got ready once more, and in the scurry for the little local train that took them to Lyndhurst, they forgot what they had been talking about. Once in the Lyndhurst train, they began discussing school once more, for all of them loved their school in the lovely picturesque Troll. It had been run by Joey Bettany's sister Madge, until the previous summer when she had married Dr. James Russell, head of the big new sanitarium on an Alp high up in the Sonnenschinspitze, a mountain on the opposite side of the lake. The present head, Mademoiselle Laptre, who had been joint head with Miss Bettany until her marriage. Miss Maynard was senior and mathematical mistress, and 4 other English girls formed the rest of the resident staff. An excellent matron ran the domestic side of the school, and Herr Ensrel from Sparts, the little market town at the foot of the mountain where the Ternsey lies, 3,000 feet above sea level, came twice a week to give piano lessons to the most promising of the girls. Singing was taught by Mr. Denny, who was obliged for the sake of his health to remain in the district, and whom the girls privately thought rather mad. Masters came from Innsbruck for the violin, cello, and harp, and young Mrs. Russell had, for the last term, come down from the Sonnalp twice a week to give lessons in English literature. This term, however, the state of the roads would make such a thing an impossibility. When March should come, bringing with it the rapid thaw, the paths would be well nigh impassable on the lake side of the mountain, and Dr. Jem, as all the girls called him, had vetoed the idea for the term, at any rate. Consequently, when Miss Maynard had informed her ex-head that she intended to spend the Christmas holidays at home, and had begged leave to take Joey and Robin with her, they might have a really English Christmas, Mrs. Russell had agreed. It suited her better, for her husband had been summoned to a medical conference at Vienna for the week between Christmas and New Year, and she naturally wanted to go with him. So Joey and Robin had come to England, and Grizel Cochrane had come with them to spend her Christmas at her own home in Devonshire. A week ago she had joined the others in the New Forest and was to travel back with them to Austria. This would be her last year at the Chalet school, for she would be 18 in May, and then she was to go to Florence to study music in earnest under one of the best masters there. It cannot be said that Grizel looked forward to her future with much enjoyment. She was not really musical, though hours of practice rigorously enforced by her stepmother while she had been in England, and then carried on under Herr Ensrel in Brassau, had made her a brilliant instrumentalist. What was to happen after Florence no one seemed to know. Grizel and her stepmother were not in sympathy with each other, and her father was too much immersed in his profession. He was a barrister with a wide practice to care overmuch about the daughter he had seen comparatively rarely. Since she was 10, Grizel had been very much a lonely child, and to her the Chalet school was the only real home she had ever known. It was home to Joey Bettany, too, though she knew that her sister and brother-in-law wanted her to feel that the pretty chalet outside the Sanalp stood for that now. She liked Jim very well, and she adored her sister. But Brassau, where she knew everyone and everyone knew her, was far dearer to her than the Sanalp, with the big sanatorium and its sad community of people who had come there in search of health. As for the Robin, she had been left motherless 2 years previously, and had been sent to the school while her father was in Russia on business. The business had long since been finished, and Captain Humphreys was secretary to Dr. Jem. The little girl was a frail creature, so, since she was happy at school, it was deemed better to keep her there, away from the sorrow of the Sanal, except at the holiday time, when she and Joey would generally be at the chalet where her father lived with the doctor, Uncle Jem, and his pretty wife. So for all the girls, and also for Miss Maynard, whose eldest brother was assistant at the Sanal, Brassau and the Chalet school meant far more than the school ordinarily does. They had all enjoyed their stay in England, but they were all very glad to be returning to Austria, and they talked about it as they treaded along in the Landhurst, where the Maynards' car would meet them and whirl them through the forest for 7 miles to Pretty Maid's, the Maynards' big house. "What I think is so wonderful," said Jo, as she accepted a lump of toffee from the sticky packet Grizel was offering her, "is the idea of seeing Basel. We've only rushed through in the train before, and I do like seeing new places. It's got heaps of history, too. All sorts of jolly interesting things happen there, and I'm simply yearning to see it." "You and history," jeered Grizel, who was mathematically inclined and regarded her history lesson as evils to be avoided. "It's so jolly interesting. I like to know what people did and how they lived and so on. It's heaps better than horrid old geometry and algebra anyway," retorted Joey, whose views on mathematics were revolutionary to the extreme. At this point, Miss Maynard thought it best to interfere. Joe and Grizel were ordinarily good friends, but both had fiery tempers and neither fully understood the other, so that battles between them were apt to be fierce, if short-lived. "There is plenty to see in Brussels," she said. "I know Robin will love the zoo. Won't you, baby? And there is a very interesting museum and a good picture gallery." "Wonderful," approved Joe. "I love animals and pictures are awfully interesting. What's in the museum, Mamie?" Out of term, the girls were allowed to use this nickname of a popular mistress since they had stayed at her home more than once and were very welcome visitors there. "A good part of it is devoted to natural history," said Miss Maynard. "Butterflies and things?" asked Grizel. "I suppose so. Then there is the picture gallery with some very famous pictures, one or two by Hans Holbein the younger, I believe. You will like the armory collection and the treasury, I know, even if the historical side of them doesn't interest you. And you will want to see Father Rhine, of course." "I love the Rhine." "Ever since I read The First Violin," agreed Grizel. "Of course, I'd rather see it at Cologne with the bridge of boats. Shall we have time to go to Schaffhausen to see the falls?" Miss Maynard shook her head. "I'm afraid not, Grizel. We are spending 1 day in Paris and 3 in Basel, and Schaffhausen is a good 4 hours or so from Basel. You'll have to wait for that till the summer. Then, if we do as we have planned, I will take you there for a few days in our way to Cologne and the Rhine cities." "But Joey and Robin won't be with us," objected Grizel. "I know it's awfully decent of you to say you'll take me to the Rhine cities before I go to Florence, but Joe is going to spend the summer holidays with Elisaveta in Belsorna, and Robin is to go to Paris. Even Juliet won't be here, as she is going to the Sunalp to be with Madame." She referred to Mrs. Russell's ward, Juliet Carrick, who was at present at London University reading for a mathematical degree. "I'm sorry, Grizel," said Miss Maynard. "If we could do it, I should say yes at once, but there will be a good deal to get through before term begins, and we shall have none too much time as it is. Later on, we may be able to arrange for the 4 of you to go together." Grizel gave up worrying, and as they were nearing Lyndhurst, they all gathered up their parcels and prepared to leave the train. But she had by no means given up the idea as yet. That was not Grizel Cochrane's way. It had led to trouble in the past, and was to do so again before she learned her lesson. Chapter 2. Basel. "Now, have we got everything? 4 cases, 2 bundles of rugs, your attaché cases, Grizel's music case, the picnic basket. Is that all? Then come along, girls, or we shall miss the train. And I don't want to do that. Come, Robin, keep close to me." Followed closely by the Robin and at a little distance by Grizel, Joey, and a burdened porter, Miss Maynard walked down the long platform of the Gare de l'Est, where the Paris-Wien express was standing, and quickly found the carriage reserved for them. It was nearly 9 at night, and they would reach Basel round about 5 the next morning. But all 4 were accustomed travelers, and Miss Maynard much preferred to do the traveling at night when the girls would be sleeping than through the day, when active Grizel and Robin would find the time pass slowly. Joey was less of a trial on long train journeys, for she was always happy as long as she had a book. The mistress quickly made a nest for Robin in one corner with rugs and an air pillow, pulled off the sturdy little boots, and tucked her up comfortably. Tired from the long day in Paris, she fell asleep almost at once, and heedless of the bright lights, the hoarse shouts of the busy porters, Miss Maynard then turned her attention to the girls. Since they had been in Paris all day and had been talking French, which came as naturally to them as their own tongue, all 4 were trilingual, as a result of being in a school where English, French, and German were all spoken freely. She fell into French in bidding them prepare for the night. Joey and Griselle did as they were told to the extent of rolling themselves in rugs and curling up on the seats, which had been widened by pulling out a kind of underseat. Experienced travelers, they slipped off their boots, exchanged their brown velour hats for tams, and in 10 minutes were ready. The mistress herself did not attempt her preparations yet. She knew that she would read for an hour or two as soon as they got off. The children were different. All were accustomed to early hours. Then silence settled down over them all, and Miss Maynard presently fell asleep till 5:15, when an attendant came along announcing that they were nearly into Basel, and would arrive there in 10 minutes. Moving as quietly as she could, Miss Maynard woke up Joey and Griselle and bade them get ready to leave the train. The Robin she left. The elder girls quickly and deftly put their things together, rolling up rugs and strapping them with neatness and precision. At this point, the train slackened speed and ran into the deserted station, where only the flaring lights and a few sleepy-eyed porters spoke of the life that thronged in through the day. Miss Maynard leaned out of the window and summoned one to come and get their things, while she herself picked up the Robin, who slept on serenely through it all, and Joey and Griselle took their rugs. Soon they were on their way to their pension, where a drowsy night porter let them in. They all went straight to bed and slept till noon. Joey was the first to wake up. She sat up in bed, wide awake in a moment, and then she looked across to where Griselle lay, still fast asleep in the bed in the corner. She looked very pretty as she lay there, her cheeks rose flushed with sleep, and her long brown curls scattered over the pillow. But ascetic sights were not in Miss Bethany's mind at the moment. Moving quietly, she lifted her pillow, stood up in bed to get a surer aim, and then hurled it well on to Griselle's face. The young lady sat up with a muffled howl, wildly clearing curls and sleep mists out of her eyes, while the pillow fell to the floor. "Joey Bettany, you little brute! And I was having such a gorgeous dream." "Time you were beyond dreams, my dear," retorted Joey, curling herself up on the bed. "It's midday, nearly time for lunch. Get up, you lazy object." "Lazy object yourself," said Griselle indignantly. "You've only just awakened yourself. I know you, Joe Bettany. And if you hurl anything at me again, I'll yell the house down. I say, there's someone coming. Chambermaid or something. Cave." Joey made a wild dive, and when the round-cheeked Gretchen came in bearing rolls and honey and coffee on a tray for two, she found them both lying very properly in bed, though the younger Fraulein did not seem to have any pillow, and the other had two. When she had gone, Joey sat up and demanded her pillow back again. "No fear," retorted Griselle. "You chucked it at me most brutally, so now you may do without. It's no good coming and scraping for it, for you'll only upset the coffee if you do, and then there'll be a row. Stop it, Joey. You'll have the tray all over the bed if you go on like this." "Give me my pillow then," retorted Jo, hauling away at it with such a good will that she finally succeeded in getting it out from under Griselle's shoulders, nearly upsetting the tray and its contents as she did so. With a cry of triumph, she darted back to her own bed. "Pig," said Griselle indignantly. "You are a little horror, Joey." "Hurry up and get on," was the only answer Joey vouchsafed, as she devoured her rolls and honey, drank the bowl of milky coffee, which she appreciated far more than the tea she had in England. Seeing nothing else to do, Griselle did as Joey suggested, and presently they were dressed in their pretty frocks, so that when Miss Maynard came, as she imagined, to awaken them, they were standing at the window looking out at the quiet street below, ready, dressed, and they turned as she entered. "Grüß Gott," said Joey, with the charming Trolline greeting which she loved so. "Ah, Manie, Just look at those darling dogs." Miss Maynard laughed as she crossed the room and looked out of the window at the sight she had expected to see. A low-wheeled cart with big milk cans slung across it and drawn by two big dogs, who were padding sedately along as if they knew how important was their charge. The whole thing was guarded by a small boy of about 10, who bore a long whip, which he cracked continually to encourage his steeds, not that they took any notice of either it or him. "Joe, you baby," laughed Miss Maynard. "You must have seen the same thing dozens of times before this. They do it in particularly every European country. I'm sure you saw it when you were in Munich." "Yes, I know," agreed Joey. "But those are such dear dogs, nearly as nice as my Rufus." "They aren't the same breed," said Grizel critically. "Rufus is a St. Bernard, and I don't know what they would call those." "Just plain dogs, I should think," said Miss Maynard, as she turned from the window. "Well, I came to call you two, but as you are ready, I will go get Robin. Mitte Jensen is at 1, but I didn't think we should want any so soon after breakfast. What do you say we go out now? We can get café at a patisserie, and you can make up for it at our evening meal. Do you agree?" "Oh, rather," agreed Joe. "Where are we going first? I want to see the history museum you told us about. Can we go there?" "If you like. I believe the Robin is longing for the zoo. What would you like, Grizel?" "I'd like to look at the shops at the town," said Grizel. "Well, we can do everything," said Miss Maynard. A little inward smile for the difference between the two girls shone in their replies to her question. "We might look at the shops and see the Barfuser Kirch today, if you like. Then tomorrow we must give the Robin her turn to go to the zoo. In the afternoon I should like to see the museum. And then that is where the picture gallery is, Grizel. Then on Thursday we might explore the town and see some of the old university buildings. Basel is one of the oldest university towns in Europe, you know, and any number of famous men came here during the Renaissance. Does that program meet with your approval?" "Oh, yes," said Joey emphatically, but Grizel shook her head. "I do so want to go to the Schaffhausen and see the falls. Couldn't we possibly?" "No, Grizel," said Miss Maynard. "I've already said we can't. In any case, this is not the weather to go and see waterfalls. I have told you, and I will take you in the summer-time. Please, let that be sufficient." "What on earth makes you so mad on the Rhine Falls, Grizel?" Joey asked curiously, when Miss Maynard had gone off to help the Robin to dress. "You are so silly to fuss like that. Mamie won't go, and you ought to know it by this time. She always means what she says." But Grizel was a determined young lady, and when she took an idea into her head, it required a good deal of dislodging. She had by no means put Schaffhausen out of her thoughts, as Joey was to find out later. Now she merely requested the younger girl not to bother her, and began to get into her hat and coat. It was a cold day, colder than it had been in Portsmouth, but it was a dry, bracing cold, and as they were warmly wrapped up, they looked forward to their walk. At Brassau it had to be very bad weather for the girls to be kept indoors, so Joey and Grizel put on stout boots and tied big scarves across their chests and turned up the fur collars on their coats, and when they had wriggled into their warm woolen mitts, felt ready for anything. Miss Maynard and the Robin, similarly attired, met them at their door, and they all trooped downstairs laughing and chattering. The first thing to do was to go to the shops, for Grizel was anxious to see them, and to buy some ribbons to send to Cookie in her faraway Devonshire home. Cookie had always been a great ally of hers, and Grizel remembered many a kindness the big woman had shown her, and always did her best to repay. Ribbon from Brassau to trim her new spring hat would be greatly appreciated. It was a good point in a character that was inclined to be hard, and the Chalet school people had always encouraged it. The discipline Grizel had undergone at the hands of her stepmother for 4.5 years had been very bad for the girl. As a consequence of it, she fought for her own hand first and was very selfish, only trying to get what she wanted, without much regard for other people. It was as Mrs. Russell had said at the end of the previous term, when she was discussing the point with Mademoiselle, a big experiment putting Grizel into the position as head girl. She will either do magnificently or she will fail badly, she had said. But Elise, I feel sure that Grizel will try to make a success of it. It may make all the difference to her in after life. And we have only these 2 last terms to influence her. After that, she goes to Florence, and it is out of our hands. Mademoiselle had agreed, and so they had sent for Grizel and had informed her of their decision. As has been seen, she had been disturbed by it. She knew, for Mrs. Russell had told her, that to be successful she must set the school first, herself last. Grizel hated to do anything and fail, but she did not like the sound of that. School first, self last. It looked as if things would not be too comfortable. She had tried to get out of it, and had pointed out that Gertrude, and was as old as she was, and she was captain of the games, and had her music to work at. It had all been of no avail. I want you to take it, and to do your best with it, Grizel, said Mrs. Russell, holding the girl's grey eyes with her own steady gaze as she spoke. Come, dear. You say you have been happy here. It isn't asking much to ask you to give us your best work for the last 2 terms you will spend with us. I know you will come back to see us, Grizel, but it's not the same. And drawn to it by the appeal in those deep brown eyes, Grizel had agreed, but she had made a proviso to herself. She would accept and would do her level best. School should come first at all times, and self should have a poor chance. So far she could manage it, but she would have her own way during the holidays. They went happily down the street. It was a glorious day for a walk, sharp and crisp, with a snap of frost in the air and frozen snow on the pavements crunching under their tread. The robin danced along, clinging to Joey's hand, while Grizel herself walked demurely by the side of Miss Maynard, chattering to her in German. She had been far slower than Joe to pick up the languages, but they had come at last through ceaseless practice. As for Joe, English, French, or German, it was all one to her. She knew a certain amount of Italian, too, and had a slender portion of Russian, a fact which had been proven of great use to her during the summer term, in which had been the means of rescuing her friend Elisaveta, crown princess of Balsorna, from the hands of her father's cousin, a half-madman who had tried to kidnap and hold her as a hostage against her father, now king of Balsorna, and her grandfather, who had been the reigning king at the time. Elisaveta was now crown princess and too important a personage to finish her education in any school, so she had had to go back to governesses in Balsorna. But the friendship between her and Joe was not likely to die, even though they could not meet, and Joey got letters every week from your loving Vita. As in Portsmouth, people turned to look at them. All 4 were so graceful, moving with a free, easy grace that had its roots in constant practice of the old English folk dances. Miss Maynard smiled as she noted how elderly men looked at the robin with her most angelic loveliness, and how they smiled to receive one of her fearless beams at them. In the shops, she still attracted attention, and while Grizel was debating whether Cookie would like a vivid purple or a lurid green for her hat, the assistants were murmuring among themselves about the little girl. The marvel was that the child was not made conceited by all the petting she had received. It never seemed to affect her in the least. When finally Grizel had fixed on a green ribbon which was bright enough to please Cookie, and yet did not scream at one, they went out and visited the toy shops, where the baby bought 2 little wooden bears, one for Inga Eriksson and the other for Amy Stevens, these 2 people being her greatest friends. "And Tante Marguerite," she pleaded, "I have 2 francs left. What can I buy for Tante Marguerite?" It was while Miss Maynard was helping her to choose a little wooden chalet that Grizel drew Joe to one side and said, "Joey, are you game for a rag?" "Of course. What is it?" demanded Joe. "You know I want to go to the falls and see the Rhine. Well, let's go tomorrow when Mamie takes the Robin to the zoo. We don't want to see it. There's only bears and things that we've already seen millions of times. We'll leave a note saying where we've gone and slip off about 8 in the morning, and then we can go there and see the falls and get back in the afternoon. Like the idea?" "I think you must be mad," said Joe, staring at her. "Quite mad. There'd be a fiendish row, and we'd jolly well deserve it after treating Mamie like that, when she's been so decent stopping here and there every day to let us see the places. I know you went off the rails sometimes, but I never thought you did it to this extent. It's one of the rottenest things I've ever heard of." Grizel was furious. It was bad enough to have a mere kid like Joey Bettany say such things to her, but what hurt most was the look in Joey's eyes. There was scorn there and disgust. There was also that which reminded the elder girl of the time when she had run away in a fit of rage to climb the Tarnjok, a dangerous mountain, periling both her own life and Joey's in the attempt. Joe had followed her to fetch her back, and the pair had been caught in the midst on the verge of a dangerous precipice, where they had to wait until help came. Joe had not meant to remind the elder girl of this, but Grizel remembered all the same. It added to her fury, and she flung herself away with a low "little pig," which brought the angry color to Joe's face. Happily, before anything further could happen, the Robin appealed to them for assistance in making up her mind which of the 2 chalet models she should choose, and by the time this knotty point had been settled, both looked more or less normal again. They were far enough for feeling it, though. From the shops they went to the Barfuser Kirch, a church dating from the 14th century, but now used as a historical museum. There the Lollinkog attracted the Robin, and she insisted on standing to watch the head stick out its tongue and roll its eyes at her. They could scarcely get her away. However, Miss Maynard finally got them to the great collection of arms, where Joey revelled to her heart's content in the curious weapons of the ages, weaving stories about them in her head, while Grizel wandered round, interested in the growth and development of warfare. From the armory they went to the series of rooms, intending to show the development of the furnishings and arranging of rooms from the 15th century onwards. Here Jo was in her element indeed. She invented stories for the Robin about the people who had lived in the different rooms, and gave them the most astonishing adventures. The Robin was entranced. Miss Maynard had to cut them short, or they would never have seen the rest of the building. The treasury, containing relics of the day that Basel had been one of the foremost of the Catholic sees, didn't interest them half so much, though Joey looked at the beautiful altars vessels with awe, and was especially pleased with the reminders of Erasmus, the great Renaissance scholar, who became the friend of Sir Thomas More, one of her heroes. She was rather disappointed to find no relics of her favorite Napoleon, but the rooms containing the musical instruments, quaint old kitherns and chitoles, lutes and harps, and the beautiful specimens of stained glass delighted her. Only think, said Joe, pausing before one beautiful example of a kithern. Laura may have played to Petrarca on that. What on earth do you know about Laura and Petrarca? Oh, only that they loved each other, and he wrote sonnets to her and invented a type of sonnet, returned Joe. After that, Miss Maynard declared that it was time for café and hustled them all out to the patisserie, where they had milky café and delicious cakes, all honey and nuts and cream. If Grizel was a little quiet, no one noticed it, and the other two made up for her silence. They had to hurry back to the pension in the end, for it was getting late, and the Abenson was at 11. The Robin had rolls and butter and milk in bed, but the others went down and made a good meal, after which they went out for a walk along the lighted streets, where sleighs were dashing along the snowy roads, and the night was happy with the jangling of the sleigh bells. When they came in, it was after 9, so Miss Maynard declared that they should all go to bed. She saw the other two to their room, made sure they had everything they wanted, and then left them, bidding Grizel see that the light was switched off at 10. As soon as she had done, Joey turned to Grizel and said, "Now." And we will continue this book next Wednesday. Thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.